Well, thanks for joining me, ladies, for this discussion on movement across cultures. And I think that this is a very important discussion, especially to have right now, as our lives continue to get busier and we continue to get this full connectivity, especially throughout the world. And so that's why I really wanted to pull in people from different corners of the world to have this discussion. Because if anybody's traveled outside of their own country, they know that there's some different traditions, there's some different upbringings from childhood, or even just traditions from ancestry that can pull in and influence how we move throughout our day or what our perspective is on movement. And I feel like this is an important conversation, especially right now, because we can get so wrapped up in what we're being fed with all this information and these trends that I just want to bring that human movement back to that human element back to movement. So I'm first going to let everybody go around and do just a quick introduction on who you are, what is it you do, and where you're from. And if you want to share like a fun fact or a favorite movement or something, I'd love to hear it. So Olga, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Olga Nikitidou Rosenberg. I'm originally from South Africa with Greek roots, and I immigrated with my family to the south of Sweden 3 years ago. I am a movement therapist, a certified life coach, and I am actually in education at the moment to get my personal training license. And a fun fact about myself in terms of movement is I love doing hip rotations. So that's where I'm at the moment, very deep hip rotations.
Yeah, I love it. All right, Irene.
Yes, hi, Christie. Thanks for having us here in your space. So my name is Irene Anggreeni, or it's written exactly as Irene, but it sounds, like in the Netherlands, Irene. I'm a mental wellness coach, and I'm also trained as a clinical dance movement therapist. And my work is really about helping people in leading roles to get more in touch with their emotions, to learn the tools to uplift them, and also in an embodied way, how to have a better self-care so they can sustain their success without sacrificing their personal lives. And a fun fact about me, I used to be addicted to Lindy Hop. So it's a swing dance, really old school swing dance with a lot of bouncing and and even thinking about it now makes me also happy.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. And Sophia.
Yeah, amazing to be connecting with everyone here. Thank you, Christy. My name is Sofia, and I'm a coach for integration and preparation for sacred medicine. So I work with the psychedelic plants and help people to connect with their bodies through fire, air, earth, and water for those journeys. And yeah, body connection has helped me so much. So I'm super excited to talk more about movement because I can get all up in my head about different things. And I was noticing the more I was sharing about body symbolism with clients, it was just the mind was getting in the way. The body always knows. So yeah, so that's what I share in my company, Elemental Empress Medicine. And fun fact is recently I've gotten more into high intensity interval training, like really intense exercise to materialize. It's been really helpful with my personal discipline. If I feel unmotivated or like I'm not achieving my goals, I'm like, great, let's get out, do some high intensity exercise. So that's where I'm at with my movement personally.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing, everyone. And for anybody who doesn't know, I'm Christie Heiduke, and I'm the owner of 9 to 5 Wellness. I specialize in personal and corporate wellness programs, and I am a personal trainer as well as a yoga teacher and a foot nerd. So one of my fun facts is that I have been pretty much 98%, I would say, except for special occasions, barefoot. So I really have not worn your traditional shoe. I've been wearing barefoot or wearing a barefoot minimalist shoe. And I'm located here in the United States. So let's just dive right in because I'm just so excited to have this conversation. It's been a minute in the works trying to coordinate with everybody, but I'm glad that we're here today. So for the first question, and the biggest one that I'm sure we're seeing, and it's the fastest one that's changing movement, is modern conveniences. So from your observations, how have people shifted how they move and their movement patterns based on modern conveniences and different modern tools that have come into this landscape to help us throughout life. And we don't have to just stick to like elevators or parking farther away. If you're in like a commuter town, we can even go into kitchen elements and different things like that. So I'll just go ahead and let anybody that's, you know, got a burning answer to go ahead.
I have a bit of a burning answer.
Yes.
What you want. Yeah, because like, you know, when you pose this question about modern conveniences, and it immediately, you know, like it gets me thinking about how how we relate with our body, what our relationship is with our body. And I got the sense, and I've been in that trap myself, like, you know, there was a point in my life where I was like using my body kind of to, you know, to reach productivity, you know, to reach my goals, and it's part of my self-care routine. I do exercise and so on. So I was using the body, but not really connecting with it, kind of, you know, like trying to fix it when it has injuries or I've experienced some physical discomfort. But the moment to moment connection with the body, it's a bit missing. And kind of that also what what I feel maybe, like, you know, kind of that needs to be a massage in, like that you know, we can also see our body not only as a tool or a means to get something or get somewhere, but really as a loving partner, maybe to our mind and, you know, just to our whole being. And kind of, you know, how I see also in the movement, the sense of movement, there are a lot of our movement patterns that have been reduced by these modern conveniences, you know, the variety of it, the range, the vocabularies of our movement. And that also means like the possibility for us to navigate in our environment also becomes more really limited. And this, for example, you know, I come from Indonesia. You know, it's very normal kind of to sit on the floor, like,
Yes.
and then get up, you know. And these things are I learned that it's not it's not taken for granted in every culture, you know, kind of. It is like, some people like, oh, really are not used to it. And that's kind of how I see, like, you know, like it's the modern conveniences is great that they're there, but it's also limiting us, like in this, you know, like this movement patterns, vocabularies, and also our possibilities to express ourselves. And I'm curious to what everyone else is thinking about this.
Yeah. Personally, I really do enjoy, you know, periods of just stripping back from those conveniences. I think they're great, but I also, it's, for me, I work with the elements. So I think I feel like I'm always in my mind about the elements unless I'm doing something like, you know, spending time with water, even the essence of like hand washing some clothes, something as simple as that. Like, it really brings me back. And this is quite a lot of the practice with dietas, with sacred medicines, is like really just stripping back to just bare minimal, you know, just like minimal clothes, simple food, and sometimes even just being with a river, you know, and not having all of these machines doing everything. And from having experiences like that, it just feels like there's actually just so much in the day. And it creates, I feel, a need to, you know, desire more money and desire more resource, and, you know, because we feel like we need all these things. But I like to question, you know, coming back to the body, coming back to movement, like actually how much we can do when we don't have those things. Does anyone else have that experience from like camping or being out in nature or anything like that?
I was going to say, when I go camping or I'm picking a spot for my family, I usually try to pick a spot that does not have reception, that does not have phone reception, because it just forces everybody, especially the kids that are so plugged in now. I mean, at least here, like in the United States, it's now regular practice for each kid to be assigned a computer that they take to school and they work on at school, and they do all their assignments on it now at school. And so they are just getting so plugged in. And then especially as they get older, they're stripping away that 1 hour of recess time. So we're plugging them further in without giving them that escape. And so I just think it's absolutely interesting and beautiful that both of you so far have mentioned mindset. because there is a huge mindset about how we're viewing these, what are essentially tools. And we're kind of almost putting our body as like that secondary tool, and the modern conveniences is the first one. Mm-hmm.
So I would just like to add that coming from the big city, so we lived in Johannesburg in South Africa, and we consciously chose, my husband and I, to move to Sweden, but on an island, so that we're back to basics. Less is more in our lives. I cook more at home, so I'm using my hands more, less utensils, so kneading dough, making bread. Instead of buying bread. So I love, again, using my body, just like you've all mentioned, using the body to create my nutrition. We love going absolutely for walks. We live 100 meters from the sea, so I'm often in the water. I love to experience the cold water, where before I used to hide away from cold water. I was afraid of cold water. Again, just facing fears, but through basic living. And through embodying these experiences through my body. So that's what we've done, back to basics.
Yeah, I love that.
Facing fears through basic living. That's so good.
Yeah. I just add, one little thing about this basic living. Thank you for bringing it up, Sofia, because that's also for me it gives the sense of being more in the moment, and especially when it's really mindfulness in a sense, being aware of like what we are creating in this moment with ourselves, with our body. And I love it that you connect the body movement with the nature as well.
Yeah. I took coming back to that mindset and that simple living and, kind of cooking and stuff like that. I usually take the week off in between Christmas and New Year's. And because it's a slow weekend anyways, I feel like the world kind of slows down, and it allows you to slow down as well. And during that time, I'm usually cooking all these meals, or I'm going above and beyond to cook these a little bit more extravagant meals, making my own bread. And even though these things might be a little bit more expensive or time consuming, at least I know I get way more sense of gratification and satisfaction out of making it by hand, of knowing that I'm providing my family with this beautifully made, nutritious meal that did have, it had my time and energy, it had my love in it. And so they get to see me do this too. One, it's my kids get to see me do all this. But yeah, stripping back to those basics and just coming back to what it is. And once we start to tune into that and start to come back to the basics, we're almost forced to come back with ourselves too. I feel like some of that is there's that disconnect where maybe we don't want to connect with ourselves and be that in tune. But I used to work in corporate, and it was going through those motions. I'd get in the car and I'd sit in the car and I'd go to work, and I'd sit at work for 8 hours and I'd come home and I'd be exhausted, throw together some okay-ish meal, and then sit on the couch because I just was tired. And so my life became this just very repeatable process that really had no heart. It didn't really have a lot of me in it. And even just looking back at pictures of myself, and if I was even just smiling in those older pictures, there's a huge difference in what I physically look like now that I'm in this space where I'm actually connected with myself. I'm not, disconnected from my body and plugged into all these modern conveniences. I've stepped back, and with that has come a new appreciation for myself, and I can actually better listen to what my needs are.
Yeah, I love it. It's interesting. Something has come up with that whole kneading of bread. I was learning how to make jam this past month because there's just so many plums on this tree outside my apartment. And I was like, okay, well, I obviously can't eat all of these. So I was like making jam. Did not realize how long that takes. It's super, super long process. So I was like, this is still going on. But I mean, through the whole thing, I was practicing preserving a few different foods and feeling a little bit of almost like a sadness with that, that there's just so many recipes and, things that have been forgotten in my lineage, my ancestry. Like I feel my great grandmother probably did these things, but it's at least 2 generations since this kind of practice of doing these, you know, basic living that we're chatting about has been in play. So I feel like, yeah, the movement of the body kind of awakens, you know, those times long ago, and we're bringing them into present day, into our present day families.
Yeah. And so that just leads us perfectly into the next question, and ancestral movements. I mean, at least here in the United States, I feel like there are some of those honorings of tradition that we're passing down, but it's still not that same sense of ancestry where you're getting together with family and making those cookies, making those pies, maybe you're canning and doing those jellies, or just doing some of those traditional things that have been passed down from time to time to time. So what kind of movements, I know you mentioned a couple, Sophia, but what kind of movements, what kind of traditions have you had passed down in your ancestry or culture that we may not be utilizing today?
If I can add, what I find is repetitive patterns. So it's when I say repetitive, it's dancing around a pole or dancing in a circle. So it's that round and round and round. So I see, Irene. So there's something about repeating a particular pattern and what that experience in that repetition brings up. And yeah, so Irene, I don't know, you want to add because you're like nodding and I'm curious.
Yeah, you brought up you know, dance as kind of a heritage, you know, from our ancestors, and I think it's like in every culture there is like this tradition of dance, maybe, you know, like also as a kind of a group communal activities. And from where I come from, like I come from Central Java in Indonesia, and yeah, I got a sense also it really connects to what is the collective story of, you know, of the people, of the philosophy of life, and also, you know, the telling of that story. And yeah, kind of in Java especially, like the traditional dance, it's not like around the pole and going round and round, but it's really as a way of offering, like offering to gods or offering to, you know, to a guest, if we welcome people as our guests, or offering to nature. And that's part of the ancestral tradition, and it's also so full of contrast. So that's why I kind of to compare, like, oh yeah, what's the maybe the story of this, I don't know, this group, this tribe. And like in Central Java, like it's, you know, the traditional dance is really gentle and slow and sustained and contained. And but if you go to Bali, for instance, which is also part of Indonesia, you probably see, you know, the dance are very sharp and sudden, and, you know, like with the eyes and hands, and like, you know, a bit like staccato. Like there's so much vibrant energy. Then you move to, I don't know, different parts. Maybe it's more seductive with lots of hips, like you know, like but all kind of and yeah. So these are all part of the story, and it can convey a lot of different meaning, like as an offering, but also what I love, you know, kind of, it's my way also to connect with my my ancestry, perhaps also my spiritual ancestry, is this movement of bowing, of you know, respect. And yeah, there are so many variations of that, but that's also kind of how I cherish this kind of my connection also with the ancestors. Like, yeah, with Sofia, like, you know, when you're making your jam and so on, like you feel connected. So this is also like, oh yeah, I'm part of something bigger, you know, I'm not just me alone, but I'm part of all these stories, collectives. Yeah, I'm curious, you know, to hear more, like, what is it with your ancestral movements?
Yeah, I feel it's interesting. Like, I'm Irish originally, so there's been a lot of revealing for me of ancestral stories through working with different psychedelic plants. So that's where I've gotten most of the information, because there's also been a lot of suppression of expression. It's not a great mix for storytelling, like the you know, it's all kind of bogged down. So I really have been curious within my own body, you know, like where what are the stories and why does my body feel as it feels, because you know, it was gifted to me from my ancestors. And so yeah, going within on a deeper level with psychedelics has just helped to unlock a lot of that. And yeah, what it showed me, I feel very connected to birthing medicine. So I'm also trained as a doula, and I worked in a maternity hospital in Cape Town, South Africa. And this just taught me so much about the ancestral movements of birth. And I feel there's a lot of birth workers in my ancestry and women's medicine, like really that type of area. And I feel with that, there's also in my ancestral lineage, like a suppression of allowing women's bodies to move as they feel they need to move, because it's not just when we're giving birth that we feel the need to like move in a certain way. Like there's all these things that are happening every single month for all of us. So that just helped me to realize like how influential it is to not understand how to connect with our body, because in those moments, like in the hospital, it literally came to the point of life and death. You know, if a woman wasn't able to connect with her ancestral movements in the body, you know, we were in the C-section, we were like in emergency mode because it just wasn't happening. So I really got to the point of like seeing, you know, where the earthly ramification of not being connected to these ancestral movements of the body kind of comes in, where that connects. I'd be interested to hear, has anyone else had a birthing experience that connected them with ancestral movements?
Unfortunately, no. Yeah, I was one of those that had to get rushed in for a C-section. And looking back on it, I think a lot of it was the suppression of movement, the suppression of the true expression, because it's just, I don't think she was ready. And you know, at that time, I didn't know it was my first kid, and I was going off of what the doctor said, and it's funny just looking at how we go through the birthing process right now, even from just the position that we put it in. And if you look at anatomically speaking, you know, laying on the back is not the best way to deliver a baby. And it might not be the best way for you. I know several people who, you know, each one was different. But yeah, I think it's just that we get put into this institute and then it almost like disconnects you from that. So unfortunately, I didn't really have that connection there, but one, we could, you know, I guess segue into that because it is part of birth, but one of the ancestral movements that just, you know, really comes to me is, even if we're talking about just movements across the board, facial movements, how we move our body. I feel like that's one big ancestral movement that we don't even like think about is ancestral, because there's so many people who'll be like, oh my gosh, that expression, that's my great Aunt Betty's expression. You're the spitting image of, you know, my great Aunt Betty. Or it could just, you know, there's just certain things that it's just like my mom, as she's now starting to age into the age where I actually remember her dad, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so grandpa. That's so Grandpa Jesse. And so it's like you start to see these things come out, and it's like sometimes when you point them out, they're like, oh, I didn't even realize. It's like, yeah, these are some of these ancestral movements, these expressions, the way we move our face, the way we move our body. Like even just like my daughter, I'm like, when you get determined, you do this little thing with your mouth and you look just like your dad. And I know we didn't teach them those. Those are just things that they see from us, or that again are just kind of, they're hardwired into us and passed down generation to generation.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because that makes me, you know, like that starts a whole train of thoughts here, you know, like with also what you mentioned, you know, like yeah, kind of they're all this ancestral movement that probably, you know, like we just experience, or we observe, like us growing up, we didn't know, like we just intuitively absorbed it, and that's yeah, kind of that also kind of creates perhaps this sense of connection, you know, like belonging. Oh yeah, we are part of the same tribe, like
Yeah.
similar movement. And yeah, it is kind of, I get thinking also, like, yeah, perhaps like, you know, as we age, like maybe we also develop a kind of a higher, you know, just being comfortable with ourselves. that maybe some of our filters, like when we're young, like we care so much about, oh, what would other people think about that those
Right.
filters, like, yeah, we let down a bit, and we're just feeling easy under our own skin, and then this movement can also surface as it's kind of just like a healthy expression, perhaps, like not suppressed, and that it can be there as well. And yeah, that also tells us kind of how what is the internal state, what are we going through, like yeah, when we are focused, like we make certain face, or like maybe posture is different. And this, I think, as human, yeah, we naturally also picks up those nonverbal signs, and that's how we create empathy as well, within ourselves for other people. That's really wonderful example that you mentioned, and I'm curious also how you experience this, like in your family, perhaps.
Well, just for me, coming from South Africa and moving to Sweden, it's interesting to see the different cultures and how they move and express through movement. So back in South Africa, we have a lot of groundedness, so we're connected to the earth. We've got lots of squats, lots of down and up movements. So there is a lot of grounding and connected to the earth. Here up in Sweden, yeah, they love to dance around poles, so again, circular movements. Frog dance, they do lots of squats, but very light, not as heavy and grounded. So again, it's just the way they express themselves in all different parts of the world, and what that evokes in the body. And again, it's the different mindsets as well. So there is a connection between mindset, what the body presents, and then a story is told. Yeah, so that's just interesting for me, and that's what I've observed moving countries.
Yeah, very interesting observations.
Yeah, the cultural difference, I feel like that's what's pushed me to travel, to be honest, just to be with the earthiness of Africa. I've been attracted to Africa over and over and over again. I lived in Zimbabwe and South Africa, and spent some time in Namibia, and then also then Costa Rica. The more areas like around America, I felt like they were more airy. They were just like lighter movements. So it's just such a blessing that we can travel so much and experience and see how different people's bodies move. I think that's also kind of educating us about other people's ancestry and really helping us see ourselves and other people more, and embrace different cultures and bring that into our body. I definitely move my body differently now, having had those experiences.
Yeah, it definitely brings a different perspective that you really can't curate. You really have to actually just go through and live through that experience. I mean, we've got apparently a strong connection here for Africa and South Africa, because that was one of my big trips. My first trip was, I mean, besides going to Canada, I've been to France and Spain and Ireland and South Africa, and I just felt that really strong connection with South Africa. We went all over the place, both Cape Town, Johannesburg, but also Pada, and got to have some of those, invited into actual homes and had traditional meals, and just having that welcomingness and having just that different, again, that different perspective. We see how they move different. Irene, you mentioned dancing is different. They met us at one of the museums and had a traditional dance, and they gave us all sticks, and so there was like pounding of sticks, and there was art, there was paint and art in what they were wearing and how they were expressing themselves, and drumming. And even when my husband was working in South Sudan, they welcomed them in with dance, and I just thought that was great, that they went into their workplace and they welcomed them with a traditional dance of that area. So they also expressed themselves and their welcome and all that through movement, which I just thought was absolutely beautiful. But having these perspectives, setting yourself into someone else's culture and just getting that experience outside of your own, it's really changed how I see the world and how I see different things going on. And I feel like that's helped peel back some of that conditioning, and making me realize we can have this simpler life, because sometimes we just get so inundated with everything that's out there. It's hard to physically block it out. So having that chance to travel and go to these villages and go and do this work and be able to see how the world is moving differently and experiencing, this same time together.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just like thinking you're mentioning
Mhm.
about this, broadening the perspectives, and yeah, that's really spot on observation, because that's also yeah, kind of how we see and maybe we experience it also there, like being in a different way of movement, being in different space, and that's really also enriching our movement vocabularies, but also it does something to our brain, that there are new pathways being created, and that's why we
Mhm.
are able to see more possibilities, or to open up our perception. And that's something that, yeah, kind of, like what I realized as well, like, hey, this is something to keep nourishing, because it's
Mhm.
either we use it or we lose it. If we
Yes.
don't, we don't use it, then okay, we just, all right, the pathways that was created so nicely will disappear over time. And yeah, thanks for bringing this up, Christy.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
even, oh, go ahead. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, no, so Irene, I was going to just say to you, yes, I get it, because I've seen how movement is a language. You don't actually have to speak words, because I'm
Mhm.
now teaching at a gym, a local gym here in Sweden, and my Swedish is not great, but I can communicate through movement without using too many words. So yeah,
Mhm.
language on its
Yeah.
own.
But yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it is. Movement is fairly universal. There's going to be some gestures that may not be, but there, in terms of, like you said, that movement piece, that just natural instinctual movements are 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 pretty transferable. And even you had brought up also just, language in general. Even language, if you think about it, is a movement. The way that we move our mouth, the way that we move our tongue. Um, I mean, even just again, like in South Africa, like there's the clicks. And so that's a different way that you're moving your mouth, you're moving your tongue. And our French, it's, they like to say that our tongue is waggling in our mouth, as Americans, because we do have very much looser mouth and tongue structure, I guess is the best way to put it, when we're speaking, where, with that French, it's a little bit more throaty, there's a little bit more contraction in the mouth. So even language, if we really want to get down to what is a movement, it's a movement too. So that's like when you're thinking of learning another language, it's a whole nother way that you have to learn to move your mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, going on to the next question, we kind of started talking it a little bit, but movement and aging. And I'm actually excited to talk about this one because I feel like, there's going to be some interesting perspectives here. But how does your culture view aging and movement? And what are some observations that you've made?
Well, definitely here in Sweden, they ride bicycles everywhere. So it's either riding bicycles or walking or catching public transport. And that's quite fascinating because, again, I have the comparison with South Africa. We're in our cars, so we're always sitting. We're never walking as much or, getting on the bicycle unless you actually do that. So definitely aging here, through my observation, people look a lot younger here. So yeah, it's quite amazing. So for me, it's definitely movement keeps you young, but it's also how you move. So you can still move, but again, are you conscious when you're moving? Because that also makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, something that's come through for me quite consistently with coaching is around very simple elemental connection between body movement and progress in life. So if someone tells me like I'm just not progressing towards my goals in the way that I thought I would, or my business has stalled, or my relationship is kind of, just stagnant, my next question will always be like, how's your exercise regime? Like, how are you moving your body? And they'll always say, oh, actually, my gym membership ended at the same time that my job started stagnating. There's always this symbiosis there between like when they stop physically moving their body. So I always feel like that brings it back of a simple answer. Like if we don't feel like we can get things in motion for whatever reason, emotionally or financially, going for a run and actually bringing the power back to ourselves and saying, okay, well, I can move my body today, even if I can't do anything else. And with that, I find it relates to aging, because it's like that there's a narrative or a story about aging that, we won't have enough time to do the things that we want to do. So like I've said this to my grandmother, I really wanted her to write down her stories because I think they're great. And she just was like, no, I don't have time. Of course you have time. We're having this conversation, you have time. Like there's still today. So yeah, I just feel like there's a strong narrative of like just not moving anymore or progressing in life. So therefore it naturally reflects in the body, where they like, there's just a natural feeling of like, okay, well, I just won't move my body then because I'm kind of on the way out. Yeah. Does anyone have that experience with older people in their lives?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a mindset thing too there. If they think, well, I've hit, especially like here, it's like, okay, well, the goal is to retire. And then I feel like a lot of the times people end up retiring from life itself. And then they're left there like, okay, well, what do I do now? I don't have this sense of purpose. I don't have this activity or whatever it may be. So I feel like, yeah, I see a lot of that where they're just like, they've kind of come to this conclusion that it's like, okay, well, and now this chapter is wrapping up and I'm just going to kind of sit and wait for the end of the book to come.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like literally, okay, well, I'm happy to wait now.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you found with your work with movement that is there a way to shift that, or slowly in a compassionate way, inspire older people to move and continue on with their lives, like by finding motivation of some kind?
Yeah, I especially like in my coaching, I focus a lot on the feet and balance and stability. So actually a lot of my clientele has shifted to an older clientele because I'm feeling this pull and this need to work with them in that capacity, because a lot of times they'll go get PT or something like that, but then they don't either follow through with those exercises that they're asking them to do, or they don't know how to do them, or it's just not something realistic for them to do at home. So I love to find ways to plug it into their everyday life. Like I've started working with my mom because she's getting older, and when we go for a walk, she likes to be very active. She set that example for me. And so she likes to be very active, but I saw that there were some imbalances, some stability issues. And I'm like, we're going to work together to work on this now so that you can still, just like grandpa, stay on your feet well into your 80s and go walk 18 holes of golf and not use the cart. We're going to keep you mobile, but we need to change up some of the movements that we're doing.
Yeah.
I have found, especially with my senior ladies, is because now I'm also doing a lot of PT sessions with them, is asking them questions. So question thinking, but bringing in awareness. So how are you walking? How are you sitting? What are you thinking? Oh, I didn't know that I needed to think about it. No one's ever told me to. Well, let's slow you down. What do you mean slow down? So let's take it slow so that you can speed up. So it's just making them aware of how they are moving their bodies and in different planes of motion. So it's just bringing that element of awareness. And I find that is very important at any age. And yeah, I don't know if any of you have found this.
I love how it goes around, like start like with the kind of feeling of stuckness, when one is like aging, like retiring, and then like there's also kind of how to integrate it into movement into the daily life. And what you mentioned just now, Olga, also about like asking them the important questions. And I think that's really also my approach, like to ask to kind of to tap into their intrinsic motivation, like okay, well like certain situation they don't want to end up with in the future, or like, or they're also curious perhaps about what becomes possible, like when they are kind of strengthened, when they have more movement possibilities. And I think what I use a lot is also, kind of, like seducing people to movements that that feel easy, that it's within their possibility to build their confidence, and also inspiring their curiosity and their kind of igniting their learning again, like, oh, I'm learning something new, for instance. And that brings also a lot of fun and joy. And that's kind of a bit for me, like a kind of the approach or the recipe, how to motivate someone, like not to not to just be there and feeling stuck, but hey, let's bring you in movement. Kind of symbolically, the movement is also the training ground, how we show up in life. And if we feel confident in this movement space, like we could also like face life with more vitality and more liveliness.
And I always like to ask too, when I'm working with clients, especially one-on-one, is what are your meaningful movements? What movements that if they went away, you would feel like you lost a little bit of yourself, or you just would feel that little bit of disconnect? What are some movements that you just don't want to lose? And I had one client that she's like, I live on a lake and we love living on a lake and we love being able to go out on the boat and go down to the dock, but there's stairs and we have to put a cover on the boat. And she's like, so to do that, I have to be able to go up and down the stairs. She's like, I don't want to be one of those individuals that's 80 and sitting on their deck and looking at the lake. I want to enjoy the lake. And so she's like, I would need to crawl. She's like, because I have to crawl onto the boat and put up the cover or get under the cover. So peeling back, what ways of movement are important to us? How we move is important to us, essentially. Being able to get down on the ground and play at ground level. You had mentioned before, floor sitting is very common in your culture. And yeah, being able to get on the floor with the kids and play and explore. It's what movement, if you lost it, what would just, what pulls at that? And I feel like a lot of times that kind of brings to their mind, or, it makes them question. They're like, oh, I didn't even think about it that way. I didn't even think think of that as a movement, but it's like, yeah, it is. It could be your golf game. It could be your daily walk. You don't realize that you're losing it until it's lost, or, and then you feel like you're missing that. So keeping them connected to those movements that motivate them, to keep staying invested in life.
This reminds me so much of an intention setting, like setting intentions. I've been working with different medicines. It's always my question with people is like, what's your intention? And the oldest person that I've held space for in ceremony has been 78. And like, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little nervous. I was like, okay, that's towards the end. It's a lot of different conversations that happen, when preparing for that kind of experience. But so it was really like, it gave me a whole new reference to aging and, what inspires people at that age, like curiosity. And there is that desire, like I could just see the soul was still so desiring to evolve and to learn and to explore more. And through that experience, like it was so incredible to observe, like because I've worked with people different ages, and that was the oldest, and I could just feel that there was so much information in their body because of all of the life experiences that they've had. And, they could then go, because they're going into their body with the medicine. So it's like they went so deep into themselves because there was just this massive well of experience. It was like having a storyteller at the table at the end. Like it was so fascinating. So I think that sense of curiosity and intention are fantastic to get that fire going, to continue moving in life. It's like, okay, well, what am I still curious about after all of this time? Because that's a huge inspiration. Like that was a massive inspiration for me at a much younger age to see that.
And what do you think? What are some of your guys' thoughts on even just our perspective or your culture's perspective on the aging and that population? I feel like here a lot of it is, well, you get to this certain age and we kind of set you over here and we come visit you once in a while and you come and interact a little bit. Where I do feel like there are some other cultures or I used to do a lot of as a kid, a lot of reenactments of like the fur trade era and stuff like that. And we always kind of delved on the Native American side. So really dove into some of their customs and stuff like that and just the honoring of the elders. And I feel like that comes from a lot of other cultures as well, where we've kind of gotten into this place, at least here, where our senior population kind of, we start to move them off to the side and we come and visit them. But I'm curious how the perspective and culture is different when it comes to that senior community and keeping them moving and engaged.
I have to reflect also like from like in Indonesia, that's perhaps like a similar mindset. Oh, like you're now elderly, like we put you aside. But yeah, kind of usually like parents, like when they get old, they also yeah, it's quite common, or it's more the norm. Like they stay with the family. But that also there's on the other side of that is kind of there's limitation of independence as well. And when I moved to Europe, I lived in Sweden also for briefly, and then I moved to the Netherlands, and I saw like wow, like elderly people here, like they are so independent, like they do their own groceries with rollator, or even with wheelchair kind of, but they have that independence. And yeah, I think that that's also like the personal mindset is of course it starts from there, but also kind of what is what is the community is doing, what is the infrastructure is around to support that. And yeah, like because I think there are always these exceptional stories. And I thought like also connecting back to the previous topic about the aging and so on, like I had to share this about the Lindy Hop, the dance, the swing dance, because I had a really great teacher, Frankie Manning, who I joined his workshop in Sweden actually, and he was still teaching until his 90s. So it was kind of, yeah, he was like because Lindy Hop actually was yeah, it was like from the African American, like it started in Harlem in New York during the 40s. So they bring a lot of the groundedness of this African ancestral movement into the dance floor, and they became really really big and popular. There's even a movie about whitey Lindy Hoppers, like really crazy movement, acrobatic.
Interesting.
But then there was a period like where Frankie, like he was a big star back then, but then he just lived his life as a postman for many decades. And then there's a revival of Lindy Hop in Sweden in the 80s. And then he started teaching again, and then it became also kind of his like his retirement didn't really work out, so he was then busy traveling the world to teach. And it was really a big inspiration, like wow, a 90 something person like has that energy, that vitality. And that's something I hold dear to my memory to this day.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Absolutely gorgeous. So I was pretty impressed when I arrived in Sweden, and I went to the gym and I saw elderly people. Like I was like, what? Where do they all come from? And such an inspiration, really. And that it's one of my favorite classes to teach is the senior class, because they're as honest as anything. They love to do anything. So you can do with these weird movements and they'll try. And you're like, oh, that's great. Let's try this. And they'll give that a try. So there is no filter. And that's what I love. And they celebrate themselves. And I'm like, this is incredible. So it's a very different mindset as you experienced, Irene. Really. So yeah, that's what I can add.
Curious to
Wow, I love
to
that.
experience what you teach them. I'm curious.
Everything from dance. I used to be a dancer, professional dancer and performing artist. So I throw in dance, I throw in strength movement, I throw in contemporary movement, I throw in anything and everything. Yeah. So I invite them to try different styles. So I put on like a piece of Michael Jackson. We'll do a bit of Michael Jackson. We'll try a little bit of swing. We'll try a little bit of jazz. So yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Any last thoughts anybody wants to share?
I feel like, yeah, we could be in conversation for much longer.
I know, that's a really broad question. Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like this could continue to go on and on, but for the sake of, honoring everybody's time. So then as we wrap up, I'd like to ask everybody, and I can always give you guys a second, but just if you had one movement piece of advice or little, say we're going to, leave a little fortune for everybody to get a little something out, what is a recommendation or a little bit of movement advice to help either individuals connect with their movement patterns or help them explore their movement patterns or continue to move?
Yeah,
I can go first if you want.
Oh yeah,
you got it, Sophia? Okay, I was gonna say everybody looked like they were thinking. So, so if I went first, I'd say don't be afraid to stack your movement behaviors and add play to movement again. Play is not just for kids.
Nice, I like that. Yeah, mine would be first thing in the morning. If you want to check in, take a deep breath into the heart and just ask your body what it wants today and just see what comes through. If it's a meal, if it's a movement, and just trust what wants to come through once a day. Just a quick check-in.
Yeah, I love that.
Yes, and what I could add is just be brave enough to step out of your comfort zone when it comes to movement. Don't get stuck in certain patterns. Explore and enjoy.
And yeah, I'd love maybe to touch about the self-expression aspect of movement, kind of to like if you feel stuck perhaps, or there's a lot of anxieties or worries, yeah, just maybe play your favorite music, something that's meaningful, and ask your body to guide you in movement. If your body could speak, what would it say non-verbally in movements?
I love that. All beautiful and wonderful tips. I love them all. They have their own little unique flavor of each one of you. I just love it so much. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for being on this call. I so appreciate it. Like I said, I think this is just a much needed conversation. And we really tied mindset into here too. And I think that was a huge takeaway, is that, and maybe a future topic is the mindset of movement, because it really is a big piece of it. And so thank you all so much for sharing your stories, for sharing your perspectives and yourselves here. I really appreciate it. And thanks for joining the conversation.
Thank you, Christie. Thanks to everyone.